guys. We got one more to go here. This is Fiona, another debut. We did another debut album, I guess, along with Lil Kim. This is Fiona Apple with her album Tidal. And in the opening montage, you heard Shadowboxer, and now you're going to hear Criminal. All right, so Tidal by Fiona Apple comes in at number 192 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 21 in 1996, number 981 of all time. It is Fiona Apple's fourth highest rated album, behind 2020's Fetch the Bolt Cutters, 1999's When the Pawn, and 2012's The Idler Wheel. Both those two albums, I'm not going to say the entire name of the album.
I was wondering if you're going to do it, Matt, or
not. Not happening. Nope, sorry. Tidal did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Fiona Apple is ranked number 150 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums. So as I said, this is her debut album. It was released on July 23rd, 1996. She's only got 5 albums, fellas. And when Tidal was released, very different than Sheryl Crow, the artist we just covered. She was 18 years old when this was released, so she's starting off much earlier than Sheryl Crow did. The genres for Fiona Apple include art pop, baroque pop, chamber pop, art rock, alternative rock, and jazz pop. Her highest charting album is 2012's The Idler Wheel, that hit number 3 on the U.S. charts, and the highest charting single is Criminal from this record, that hit number 21 on the U.S. charts. So some artists that influenced Fiona Apple include Joni Mitchell, Billie Holiday, Ani DeFranco, Carole King, Jeff Buckley, Kate Bush, Nina Simone, Tori Amos, Chrissie Hynde, Bob Dylan, Elton John, Laura Nyro, Patti Smith, and Suzanne Vega. And artists that she has influenced include Bat for Lashes, Jason Mraz, Feist, Olivia Rodrigo, Regina Spektor, Tegan and Sarah, KT Tunstall, Nellie McKay, and Sufjan Stevens. So some history on Fiona Apple. She was born Fiona Apple McAfee Maggart on September 13th, 1977 in New York City. Her mother was singer Diane McAfee, and her father was an actor, Brandon Maggart. She grew up in Harlem with her mother and sister and spent summers with her dad in L.A. She attended private schools and was also homeschooled for a period of time. And she was classically trained on the piano and started writing her own music at the age of 8. She suffered from several kind of mental issues, including OCD, anxiety, depression, was diagnosed with PTSD after this, and this is terrible, but she was raped at the age of 12 in Harlem. And she developed an eating disorder after that. She said people thought she was anorexic, but she just said, basically, I did that on purpose. I slimmed down so that I would not be as attractive to potential predators. So pretty dark, occurrences early on in her life for sure. She took some self-defense classes as well, but she also suffered from panic attacks. So lots of pain for Fiona Apple early in her life. And in a 2000 interview, she actually stated that despite speculation from journalists and other people that she did not write songs about the trauma that surrounding her rape, that was never any a main topic of any of the songs that she wrote. So in 1994, she made a demo of some of her songs and gave it to a friend who was the babysitter for a music publicist by the name of Catherine Schnecker. And Catherine Schnecker passed that tape along to Sony music executive Andy Slater, who then signed Fiona Apple to a record deal. And so she comes out with this record. She won a Grammy for the Best Female Rock Performance for Criminal, and she also won an MTV VMA for Best New Artist for the Sleep to Dream video. Her acceptance speech was a little controversial. She basically got up on stage and said, that she didn't, write a speech. I'm not going to say anything like everybody else does. And she basically said that, something to the effect of, this world is bullshit. You should model your life or after, or anything that you do or what you think is cool based on anything that we do up here, to go do your own thing. So basically telling people that this is MTV and the music awards and all that's a bunch of nonsense. And so she got some flack for that. The video for the song Criminal was featured. It was a little controversial as well. There's a little suggestive, she's kind of like in her underwear for most of the video and kind of provocative. So there was a little controversy with the video. I didn't know this. It apparently was featured in the 1997 MTV special Beavis and Butthead Do Thanksgiving, which I didn't realize was a Beavis and Butthead special. So I thought that was kind of funny. And actually up until Beavis and Butthead's revival in 2011, it was the last video to be critiqued amongst the duo of the videos that they had done up until they re-released they redid the show. So we're certainly gonna cover Fiona Apple more times. Like I said, she's only got 5 records, so but when she drops them, they count. They're usually pretty highly praised. And I think it's Josh's turn to start. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think I know one of her later albums because Emily had it, and I remember liking that. I remember Criminal and the video, but that's pretty much like my only context for Fiona Apple. You named all of her influences. Those are all the people that I've thought of in terms of influence and what she sounds like. I really like her voice. She has this like low kind of husky voice or deeper voice that is like really appealing for the type of music that she writes. This album is very obviously like piano focused, being classically trained, as you said, and so that's kind of the front and center. But there is a like a sumptuous quality to the sound of her albums. There's a lot going on, and it made me immediately think of like Kate Bush and like Tori Amos, and now like I have like much more appreciation for like her lineage too, knowing those artists a lot better. And so I really like that. She has a lot of, it's funny you said chamber pop, because there is like an orchestral quality to like how her songs are composed. There can be like strings, like on Shadowboxer. I think there's like a xylophone. I think there's like a mellotron on Criminal or something that's really interesting. And so from song to song, although she has this like kind of tonal quality that I feel like is the same throughout the album, the songs themselves kind of have a depth when you start listening to them more closely that I really appreciated. She transitions into like kind of having like a jazzy feel on the album, and Slow Like Honey, that's kind of a slower song. It feels more like almost like a jazz club type of feel to it on the piano. And then The First Taste is interesting because it's almost got like this like bossa nova beat to it or something that is unusual. The other strong quality to her is her lyric writing is really strong. She really can turn a phrase, and like also has a lot of imagery that I picked up on that I really like. And so I'm really, there was something missing from this album for me that I can't quite put my finger on. I think maybe it's kind of the tone of the album kind of stays the same throughout. That is a little detraction, because I remember hearing some of her later albums and liking them a lot more. So I think maybe this is just like kind of a debut album type of beginner type of still trying to figure herself out, or kind of figuring out all of the things that she wants to be. There's clear talent here, and obviously I know that in retrospect too, but you can tell from this album that she's doing something different, that she's kind of singing about things from a female perspective and a feminist perspective that I picked up on as well. She has like a kind of a real like emotional quality to her in a good way, like sullen girl. What I'm trying to say is that she's like she emotes really well in her songs as well, and which I really liked. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this album. I feel like I need maybe like one more listen to like really lock in on it. But overall I appreciate it, and I really liked it, and I thought that it's like kind of like one of those albums that I'm like excited to hear the other ones in kind of chronological order that we discussed too, to see kind of how she evolves as well. Because like you said, she's like 18, and I think I saw too that some of these songs were written when she was like even younger. So I feel like there is some kind of growth potential that we'll see in some of these subsequent albums. So yeah, it's a thumbs up for me. I would have liked, maybe I went in with too high of expectations ultimately. Like maybe I was expecting to be blown away or something, and it didn't quite get there, but I did really like the album. So thumbs up.
Well, Josh, I'm a little higher on this album than you are too. I really love this album, and I had an immediate pull to Fiona Apple when she came out. I can remember hearing Shadow Boxer was the first song of hers, which I think is just an incredibly good song lyrically. Fiona Apple writes really interesting songs lyrically. She manages to write very complex and high-level literate songs without it becoming too on the nose or too convoluted, which is such a hard thing to do, because a lot of times people fall in love with their words and sort of lose the general idea by being too like, I'm going for an A in creative writing and not enough real feel behind it in some ways. That is not her. Like some of her turns of phrases are like remarkable, like that she uses, and just this album is like really rich with great lyrics. So that's the first thing. The way she plays the piano is a perfect compliment to her voice. Certainly you can make a comparative point to Tori Amos. I think there's quite a bit of similarities there in terms of like all the pieces of her voice, her song construction, her lyrics, and the way she plays instruments all kind of come together to give each of her songs their own narrative quality, I think. Laura Nyro is another really good touch point. Now, it was a long time ago that we covered Laura Nyro, but being familiar with her work, I do think that, and she's a New Yorker too, right? So like there is a New Yorkness to Fiona Apple. I think like later, like Alicia Keys like tries to be it from a different angle, and interestingly enough, I've never really resonated with Alicia Keys. And I'm like, I wonder why, like, I like the genres Alicia Keys is in, but I don't like her music, but I like love Fiona Apple's. And I think it really comes down to the angle that she takes. Like Alicia Keys is big, right? Like big, grandiose feelings, right? Like, you know, broad, where like Fiona Apple's like more nuanced in terms of her feelings. And I remember she kind of got stereotyped as like sad girl, right? Like that was her whole thing. Yeah. It was like, oh, she's it was like kind of like the narrative was always like, she's kind of hot, but she's a sad chick, right? Like that was kind of her thing. And it was interesting because you know, full disclosure, like I was lucky enough, you know, this is I am fully aware of how this might come off, but it will go somewhere. I was lucky enough to have like actual female friends, right? Like females were like 3D for me, right? You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I had to have a daughter, right, to like understand that women had feelings, right? You know what I mean? Or like date them or separate them and a lot of my female friends had like a Fiona Apple vibe, you know what I mean? So it was like kind of a through line of some of my friendships was people that thought deeply about the world, like had an introverted take a little bit, you know, like struggled with some of the bigger questions, right? And that was really an appealing like connection that I would have. And I always felt like Fiona Apple was like the artistic sort of paramour like for that in a sound. And then you throw in that she's got this really great voice. It's kind of like Toni Braxton in a different way, right? Like this very evocative voice that, you know, you feel like you're reading her diary would be how I'd describe this album. And later, you know, she goes in different directions. There's always that part of it that you're kind of seeing, you know, there's like a voyeuristic quality a little bit to Fiona Apple where like she's showing you like what's been brewing. And that's even like the whole idea that she doesn't release an album for like years and years and years, and it comes back. It's like, oh, now I get to like read Fiona Apple's like sketchbook or diary, you know, like see what's going on behind closed doors, which I kind of love, like an artist who manages to keep a level of mystery. And then you throw in that like she's writing these songs at like 17. It's like, how can you be like the most literate person talking about teenage love? It's kind of like, it really is remarkable, the depth of how she's like feeling, right? You know, at that stage of her life, and how like fully formed she comes on a debut album. So this album just sounds great. It's produced great. It's really, it's one of my favorite female singer-songwriter albums of the 90s. And pretty much I kind of feel like Fiona Apple, like I do about Kate Bush, that like you just kind of can't go wrong with whatever angle she takes. She kind of has a career like a Kate Bush, and that you're always curious as to like what each of her albums is going to be, because you can't really put your finger on like what Fiona Apple is. She's like lots of things, and this just happens to be sort of her like coming of age, expository. It's almost like her Joni Mitchell Blue, but at like a much younger stage of her life, right? So instead of, you know, having a I'm learning life's experience from, you know, different angles, this is sort of like a young love version of Blue, kind of in its own way. Like I learned lots of things from this one very deep formative relationship. So really strong thumbs up. This is such a great album.
Yeah, I'm probably in the middle between you guys. I don't think I think I'm higher than Josh, but not as high as John. I didn't really connect with Joni Mitchell, with Fiona Apple right away. It wasn't until her second record, the When the Pawn album came out, and a buddy of mine had that in college, and I remember listening to it one night, and it was just like, holy crap, what like that. And so this was an album that I went back to after already having, you know, been exposed to the second record. And I think in some way I agree with John. I think this is in many ways this is a phenomenal record. God, the fact that she's 18 and like how fully formed, you know, her sound is, her voice is on this, the piano playing, the lyrics, even as not a lyric guy, there's
the composition.
It's like really intricate, really like, really kind of interesting, and complex, you know, like chords that she's playing, and it's certainly setting a mood, right? It's not a happy mood, right? Absolutely. It's kind of it's like it's a melancholy. There's sadness, you know. It's in the music. It's in her voice. There's not a whole lot of pep to this record. But having said that, when you've got like sometimes when they throw in drums like on Sleep to Dream or Criminal, right? There's this you're kind of making things a little bit more interesting, that you're incorporating more percussion and production to it. You know, those are welcome additions, I think. I like that fact that she's throwing stuff like that in there. So even though this record might not be about her rape specifically, there's still a lot of pain in here. I think I read that, you know, a lot of these songs were written after the breakup of their first boyfriend, and
it's definitely a breakup album, lyrically, for sure.
There's a lot of heartache, and I agree with you, John. Like Shadowboxer, like I kind of like when I was paying attention to those lyrics, I was like, damn, what an interesting. Like I'm shadowboxing. I'm trying to prepare for whatever else you're going to throw at me, you know, because I don't know when it's coming, and I got to be prepared, kind of a thing. And just the way that she was kind of, you know, explaining that and just expressing that I found very interesting. So
even just saying things like "what a cunning way to condescend" is such a cool lyric, and also sounds amazing with like the in rhyme and stuff. It's like she does creative things,
Yep, for sure. So even I can recognize stuff like that. In some ways, she's kind of like and I don't mean this in a bad way, but there's a little bit of a lounge singer, kind of like late night at this bar where you got a piano and there's like a couple of people that are there, and she's just kind of like pouring her heart out, you know, kind of a vibe at like 3 a.m. or whatever. But she's got her voice is so it's just like this mature sounding, like, you know, velvet, you know, sensual, passionate kind of voice that just flows really nicely with the music. So I think in many ways it's a really brilliant album. But it's also an album that's I don't feel like I can just listen to this at any time. I feel like this is kind of like I need to be in a certain mindset, I think, to truly enjoy it. Um, the only knock I like the one song that I kind of I don't know if I dislike it, but I definitely it's a little bit harder for me to get into is Pale September, and I think that one is kind of the way that she's playing the piano, the chords that are there. It's a heavier song, I think. Amongst a sea of heavy songs, it's like an even heavier song that sometimes is a little bit, man, sometimes there's pain in the music that I sometimes don't want to like necessarily hear, I think. So it's kind of like this interesting juxtaposition of really recognizing how great this album is, but also being like, I don't know if I really want to hear that right now. I don't really know if I don't say I dislike that song, but I don't know if I like it either. It's this weird kind of hybrid of something. Yeah, it's a little bit of both, right? Like I get on that song in particular, I get kind of a variety of different
It's
takes.
funny. I find that to be a really beautiful song. It's melancholy, but like beautiful melancholy.
You're right. There's a beauty to it, but it's also like I also get there's something about the chords that she's hitting there. They're just like oof.
Well,
it's a heavier
lyrically,
kind of thing.
It's about positive memories of a relationship that has just ended. So you're sad about the relationship ending, but you're remembering one of so
which is kind of what that is. It's a mixture, right? You're like you're nostalgic and there's a positive connection with the past, but also sadness and the fact that it's gone, right? So it's both those things. So that makes sense, right? I think Fiona Apple, like I know her other albums as well. And I think that she gets more interesting. I think musically she definitely expands her sound. She gets more interesting. But for what this record is as a debut album, damn, it certainly stands out, right? As kind of a unique artist. But having said that, there's Tori Amos in here for sure, right? It's just that Tori Amos was, had a couple of records.
There's Joni Mitchell in here,
and Joni Mitchell in here for sure. Yeah, a lot of those artists that and even like going back to like Billie Holiday and stuff like that. There's this goes back to the even pre proto CTS stuff, 50s stuff that we didn't really cover. You know what I mean? So this, but it also is very much. It fits in with the 1996. This is timeless music as well. So whether it's back in the 50s or the 90s or today, this doesn't really age or anything like that. It's kind of like a timeless type of music. So yeah, she's mad talented. And I definitely enjoyed this record.
And I'll kind of end with, I can remember seeing an interview with Fiona Apple one time where she said that she had a weird thing where when she would write a song and play it, she was always sad after she did it. And the person interviewing her was like, why? And she's like, because like I produce the music and I think I always want like the reaction of like, this is transformative in the way it is for me to put this there, but you're never going to be able to get it because it's your narrative. And so there's like a sadness whenever I share. And I was like, I just thought that was like both sad, but also like really cool as an artistic thing because it talked about how like personal, right? It was, and I always process Fiona Apple as like she's an introvert, right? You know what I mean? She thinks deeply and feels deeply and has a little bit of that like hole up in a bedroom. And in the way that my friend, I am not a true introvert, but a way that I have a lot of friends who are. And one of the things I really love about my friends who are introverted is like they take time, right, to kind of like allow things to be a little bit and process in a way that sometimes those of us that are a little bit more extroverted don't have the patience to do. And I do feel like to some degree, that's a part of what really strikes me with her music is that level of detail and awareness that comes from that space. So, yeah.
Nice.